All right, we touched on this in the first segment, but President Biden and the left continue their attacks on Senator Tommy Tuberville for his stance on life. And conveniently, they ignore the impact that the COVID jab had on our nation's military. We lost more than 8,000 trained and dedicated troops who refused to take the shot. But now Coach Tuberville's stands for life somehow is a crisis with in the ballpark of about 300 positions at stake compared to well over 8,000. Well, joining me now to discuss this and more is Daniel Schmid. He's the Senior Litigation Counsel at Liberty Counsel, which continues to work for the religious freedoms of our troops. Daniel, welcome to Washington Watch. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you, Jody. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, let's dive into this. And first of all, before we jump in, let me just say to you very sincerely, thank you for the incredible work that you and Liberty Counsel do for our military families. We all across the nation are grateful for that. But yesterday in this House subcommittee hearing on the impact of the COVID-19 vaccine mandates, it was quite an interesting thing. I want to start with this claim that came out from Democratic Congresswoman Jill Takuda. Listen to this clip, please.
My Republican colleagues have suggested that vaccine requirements undermined military preparedness, but in fact, the opposite is true. Increasing vaccination rates in the military, including through vaccination requirements, helped to ensure that our service members were better protected against the spread and harm of COVID-19.
All right, there's the talking points. Let me get your reaction to it.
Well, first off, and you said this at the very beginning, how does losing 8,400, roughly, members, well-trained, that we have invested, that signed up to dedicate their life to the freedom of Americans, how does losing them help military readiness? To shove many of the best of what we had out the door because of their sincere religious convictions. No one would argue, I would suggest, in their right mind, that kicking out 8,400 well-trained people helped military readiness. Let's start there. Two, when you start to look at the impact of what the vaccine did to these individuals who accepted it, it had a gross diminution on military readiness, if you will. There's evidence, ample evidence in the record, and the DoD knew this, that the COVID shots themselves caused myocarditis, pericarditis, caused all manner of problems for military members who accepted them. We represented a Green Beret flight surgeon, Dr. Pete Chambers. He had served this country honorably for 38 years. He's one of 6 Green Beret flight surgeons in the world. And he had to retire early and somewhat postpone actually getting out because the COVID jab, the Moderna one, caused demyelination of his cardiovascular system. This is a man, 38 years. And the stories go on and on and on and on with young men who were otherwise healthy, who developed myocarditis, pericarditis, all other manner of diseases that precluded them from training, that precluded them from being deployable, that precluded them from doing what they signed up to do and what they're heroes for doing, because the government forced them, against their religious beliefs in many cases, to accept a vaccine that didn't prevent transmission that we now know, and certainly didn't help military readiness.
Absolutely. And, I think one of the key words you mentioned there was anyone in their right mind. I mean, this is all just political talking points. It has nothing to do with science. It has nothing to do with military readiness. This is all political left-wing talking points that's being crammed down the throats of our servicemen and women, as well as the people of the United States. So we have the Senate Democrats. This is just another layer to all of this. They continue to shoot down efforts, just yesterday, I think, effort to reinstate service members who rejected the shot. Now the COVID is over. All right, we can have these people back, but they don't want these people back. I mean, there is a harm to military readiness. What do you make of that type of, frankly, hypocrisy in the midst of all the recruiting crisis that the military is facing?
Well, it certainly is hypocrisy, and it's foolishness, to be honest. The notion that you would remove 8,400 healthy young men who dedicated their lives to protecting the freedom of this country, that you shoved out the door because they wouldn't accept an experimental vaccination, And then when it's over with and the evidence is in, and we know it didn't prevent transmission, we know it didn't prevent infection, we know it didn't work, and in large degree it was harmful far more than it was helpful. And these individuals, who many of them are willing to come back in and say, I would love my position back, I signed up to fight, I want to keep fighting, to say, no, we won't have you back, says a lot about our current political class and the nonsense that exists in Washington at the moment. The recruiting crisis, as you say, is of epic proportions right now. We have a problem. And I think we have a problem. Many young people look at it and say, well, look what they did to the people who were just like me. They threw them out in the cold because they wanted to exercise their religious beliefs. And now you want me to sign up to join up for that. Not letting them, the former ones back in, is hurting the recruiting crisis by not adding those numbers back, but it's also hurting the recruiting crisis because it's not encouraging others to sign up. This entire experiment that they engaged in with COVID, and we know it from the cases that have come out about silencing conservative viewpoints and silencing the evidence and all the manner of things that came out.
All these things are being, they're just being stacked on one another. Now they're actually an additional kick in the face, if you will. They're making these servicemen and women who were forced out because the refusal to take the vaccine, now they're having to pay back their signing bonus for getting in. I mean, that type of stuff has massive impacts, does it not, on the recruiting ability?
It does, and it's worse than that. In some instances, they're being asked to pay back recruiting and signing bonuses. In other avenues that we've heard with people we represent, they've sought to have them repay the training, the cost of the training that they went through. And here you have these young men and women who are eager and willing to join back up in the forces. They can't come back in, they won't let them, only because they exercise their sincere religious beliefs. And now they seek to actively punish them for doing so. It's doing little more than pouring salt in their constitutional injury. And we have to come to a point where we say enough is enough with this.
Absolutely. Daniel Schmid with Liberty Counsel, thank you so much for joining us this evening on Washington Watch, and thank you for the incredible work you do for our military personnel.
Thank you, Jody. Pleasure to be here.